Wife, Mother, Drunk. Motherhood, Alcohol, and Finding Self-Acceptance, featuring Emily Redondo. What is it like to be in the shoes of a wife and mother who is drunk? Emily Redondo, Texas-based author with Minnesota roots and writer of the memoir Wife, Mother, Drunk, shares her vulnerability about her experiences. Emily shares her personal journey through alcoholism, recovery, and the challenges she faced as a mother navigating stigma and expectations. Explore the impact of addiction on families, the barriers mothers face in seeking help, and the importance of compassion in treatment and recovery spaces. Emily speaks openly about return to alcohol use, shame, self-acceptance, and why recovery is never a straight line. Learn about the value of empathy, meeting people where they are, and creating safe, judgment-free spaces for those struggling with substance use. A powerful conversation for anyone interested in addiction, motherhood, recovery, and the courage it takes to tell your story.
This is Talking Addiction and Recovery, the podcast talking, you guessed it, all about addiction and recovery. Join your host, licensed professional counselor Andrew J. Schreier, as he and his guests break down recovery topics with raw honesty, delving into niche conversations around the topics of substance abuse, mental health, and gambling. We intend to meet individuals where they are on their own personal journey of recovery, with dignity, respect, and compassion. We'll do more than talk addiction and recovery. We'll explore it. We're glad you've joined us. Here with today's episode, your host, Andrew Schreier.
Our guest on this episode is Emily Redondo, who is a writer, bookworm, and proud mother of four, whose articles on recovery and motherhood have been featured in Love What Matters, Genius Recovery, and Legacy Launchpad. Her interests include gardening, camping, collecting antique curiosities, and tinkering with her latest DIY project in her workshop. She lives with her husband Pete in their lively household in McKinney, Texas. You can learn more about her in the podcast notes. Let's welcome Emily to Talking Addiction Recovery podcast. On this episode of Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast, we want to welcome Emily Redondo. Thanks for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, before we dive into your book, Wife, Mother, Drunk, which is going to be a great discussion, can you give the audience members just any little bit of background about yourself?
Well, I live in Texas and I'm married to someone in recovery. My husband, Pete, has 20 something years and we have four kids. They are now pretty independent. My youngest one is 15. He's a freshman in high school. And then I have a 17-year-old, a 20-year-old who's in college, and a 27-year-old who just got married.
Wow. In
Yeah.
Texas, yeah, all the
Yeah.
way in Texas. But you do have roots connected to Wisconsin, where I am.
Yeah. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but even though I live in Texas, I don't really call myself a Texan. My heart is in Minnesota for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for joining. And the book you wrote, Wife, Mother, Drunk, an intergenerational memoir of loss and love. I will say I really dove into this book and read it nearly straight through. I was on a
Mm.
trip. Actually, I was traveling and got stuck on several flight delays. I was in airports for several hours, and I read this book in like 2 days, 3 days,
Wow.
and just kept going with it. And I really enjoyed it. And one of the things was alcohol goes through like these moments where we talk a lot about it, and then it goes away because there's talks about like opioid use and stimulants and other
Hmm.
things, and then it comes back up again. So
Yeah.
we forget about it, and then it's something that we say, oh, wait a minute, we this is still going on. So
Yeah.
when I read your book and this was part of the story, I was like, this is really good because we need to keep hearing more about, what's going on with it as it's sometimes forgotten. I wanted to ask you about the title because Wife, Mother, Drunk. I was curious that also daughter could have been added to that title and what you talk about in the book. So I'm curious
Definitely.
where that may have been or just choosing the title for it. But I thought daughter was also a big part that could have been alongside that title.
Huge. Well, I didn't pick the title, which a lot of people are surprised to say that, but you get a publisher and there's certain things that, you know, But I did not like the title when I first heard it. I was like, because, I wanted something kind of, softer, shall I say. But the title comes from a real life experience that I had actually with a therapist out in California. And that's how I described myself. She was asking me, about like, what would you like to pursue? What are your, and I told her, I said, you know, all I am is a wife, a mother, and a drunk. I don't even know of anything else. And she really kind of pressed into that. And that was in, I think, 2014, and where she she really encouraged me to maybe try to write a book um, about my story. And because I've always wanted to write a book, I love writing. And then, I had some stops and starts, but I really focused on pursuing it for the last 8 years. And what I find interesting about it is I was so prickly about, what am I supposed to say? I wrote a book and okay, here's what it's called. It's like, you know, you kind of get the idea. But then it's also like it's very entertaining, maybe to for some, like my in-laws' parents, would ask me, "Oh, you wrote a book. What's it called?" And I say wife, mother, drunk, and they're like, wife, mother, what? That's kind of, but it's like so self-explanatory now that I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I gotta imagine that's also hard though with the idea of any of the time that I've worked with substance use, that a mother with a substance use issue is
Oh,
how incredibly more stigmatizing it is. And so to even have that as a title is also that puts a lot out there. That
yeah,
that is not easy to do because there's so much that I see come out with when there's a mother involved that, there's a comparison of how could you pick this over this? How could you do that over
yeah.
that when you do this?
Oh,
So
I've heard it all. And
yeah,
also, so, I mean, even now, some articles that I've written that allow comments, there's no sympathy for an alcoholic mother. It's for her husband and her children. And I get that. I mean, they deserve it, but I think that also it dehumanizes that we're real humans too.
yeah, and there's a lot more barriers for a mother to seek help and to get care and to go to treatment and like it's not made easier. It's even a lot harder
Right.
for access to care for moms.
Yeah. And I did go to a lot of rehabs, and, the financial strain of that is insane, first of all, because I was a stay-at-home mom. I kind of had to be a stay-at-home mom. We had, four young kids, and I would not make enough to even pay for childcare at the time. Um, but I think the thing about rehabs is they're really kind of geared for moms. I mean, not for moms, but for single people who, or maybe men who can, sort of like have responsibilities taken off of them, focus on their sobriety or their recovery. And I mean, I would come home with an aftercare plan that was rock solid. It looked so pretty on the calendar. I even had like laundry days and stuff. And then I walk in the door, and, my three of my kids were under 5. And I mean, just that alone was so overwhelming. And then you have the mother guilt of being gone. And my husband, he was working like 13-hour days outside of the home at his office. And he's been running the whole show. So I felt, like, okay, I need to step it up. And it was, it was insane. It was kind of like going right back to the situation that exploded in the first place. I'm like going right back into the scene, the crime scene, really, of
I think
where it
you're,
all happened.
and I think your book did a really good job of talking about something that you don't hear enough about is when people do leave treatment, leave rehab, and when they
Mhm.
come back home. And a lot of times we talk about like people, places, and things that are like high risk and that
Yeah,
are trigger. But really even just coming home,
yeah,
just even going back to the familiar place. It didn't
yeah,
have to be going back to using buddies, or didn't have to be like going back to like a bar, which is like all these things that are talked about and
yeah,
planned,
yep,
that just even transitioning, coming home, while it's a lot of times a celebratory and an exciting thing, and then, life is just right there wanting you to get back to what was going on.
yeah,
I really thought your book did a great job of talking about that transition period because we don't hear a lot about that. It's really hard to even know what's going on when someone
yeah.
leaves. And I thought your book did a great job kind of highlighting that transition part that from outside looking in, we don't get a lot of insight into.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you for saying that, because I think that was part of, that was some of the hardest thing was coming back. And also, I live in, suburbia, and the moms that were, in my circle were usually from play dates or the kids' friends' moms. And, um, you know, there was not a warm welcome when I came back also. So, I kind of felt like the outcast more than usual, but it was weird. It was really isolating and strange, uncomfortable. Like there's definitely a stigma there, as far as women who have gone to rehab, gone to any kind of treatment, really.
Yeah. I want to ask you about one of your experiences that you wrote about in going into treatment. And
Mm.
the the part was, I think about when you were in North Carolina, it may have been, but
Okay.
there was this interaction that you had, and the person, the quote in here was, "Thank you for talking to me like I'm a real person. It feels good. I wanted to say more with my throat closed, and this stranger understood." So we were talking a little bit before about how I'm always trying to look at like what can we do better? How are we doing when it comes to providing care, providing treatment? And it's amazing that sometimes the things that stand out most is just how we talk to somebody, how we treat somebody. We try and think of all these other things that are gonna make a difference and what's this new shiny technique or this new therapy, which they have their place, don't get me wrong. But we often just forget simple kindness, compassion, and and when I read that, I was like, this is what stands out sometimes when you go to a place. How
Yeah.
someone talk to you makes a significant difference.
Yeah. Just these tiny little acts of kindness. And I think that I had gotten to the point, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, where, you know, everyone who interacted with me wanted to fix me. There was something wrong with Emily, and it all has to do with alcohol and um, everything that she needs help, and she needs fixing and correcting and advice. And, almost like even females kind of became like this parental relationship where everything was getting, oh, well, don't do that, do this, do that. Oh, try the, it's just whether it was related to sobriety or not. And, we're not stupid. Um, and it was not helpful, as far as that was concerned. But the thing about what happened in that hospital, it was actually like somebody who, came in night shift just to check your blood pressure kind of a thing. And she just spoke to me like a really kind person. It's kind of the same thing of like, there's also a place in the book where I talk about an experience that I had in jail. And it it was so overwhelming at the time. I was so not used to it. That's why I could barely speak. I just like I'm so overwhelmed with just these tiny acts of kindness that I wasn't getting in my everyday life.
Yeah, I think it's such a good reminder to hear that that is sometimes what can stand out is how we talk to someone, treated someone is what someone remembers as being different. It's what goes into like an
Yeah.
important part of the story. So I'm always trying to remind staff of that because I think sometimes substance use treatment and other kinds have sort of used this like a authoritarian way, like this is how you need to do it. If you don't do it, you're labeled non-compliant, you're labeled this. And part of me is like, we need to treat people just as kindly as we do when we go to places, when we go
Yeah.
somewhere, that people who use substances and struggle with mental health deserve that same compassion, not to be treated or talked to any differently, especially from professionals, because I really want to hold us to like this standard of
Yeah.
how we treat people. So it was very reassuring to see that that's something that you wrote about as something that stood out.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. There's a part in here that I want to talk about because I think it really helps to capture when someone reads this and doesn't understand maybe what's going on. I found this pretty, you were talking about drinking, and in the same sentence as saying that drinking was normal, the next part that you mentioned was hiding alcohol, which to me then is like, well, that's a part that's not, you know, the same, right?
Right.
So within the same sentence, let's say the same paragraph, you're right about here it is. I need a drink, I thought. It's what normal moms said after a long and hectic week. And then two sentences later, I bought myself a 4 pack of mini Chardonnay wine bottles. I hid them in my bedroom when I got home. Like in the
Yeah.
very same sentence, there's this is normal.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden there's this is not what is considered normal.
Right.
So I wanted to bring that up because I think that's just where people wrestle with trying to understand that because of that now this is normal, this is not normal. Like,
Yeah.
how do we get people to even really sort of grasp what this tells us when we see people doing things that are sort of like in that discrepancy and stuff like that? Any thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Well, I know the part you're talking about. And, um, I was a new mom, um, a single mom. And I was so absolutely flooded with life. I was also working full time and a student full time. And I lived with my mom. My mom got sober when I was 15. Um, and so I kind of grew up in the AA formula. That was, I mean, I can't stand the word gratitude or gratitude list, or I'm so done with it. And the serenity prayer, those kind of things. And it just was like nauseating to me growing up. But I kind of, it's like we rationalize with ourselves a little bit and we don't even know we're doing it. This is part of, I think, some of the generational stuff because I thought it might, I didn't want to send off any discomfort or hyper reaction from my mom if I just wanted to drink. So part of me was thinking, I'm doing this for her benefit, but I also drank in my bedroom that same time. And that's the first time that I thought, oh, this isn't good. This isn't good. This isn't the way people do it. You know, they usually have, I don't know, a wine glass, maybe. I don't know. And here I am chugging out of bottles. Um, yeah. So it was this interesting kind of thing because that started the pattern for me that I didn't drink in front of people.
And one thing I want to point out, because even the part of normal, at first I was like normal for who? And then I was thinking too about how like m mom and wine culture is still pretty heavy, but yet also there's this heavy stigma if you have a problem with alcohol, but you can but there's a lot to invite you to alcohol and to have alcohol as a mom. Sometimes that's like the gift, right? Like sometimes people are like, "Oh, this is what you need after all this." So like it's
Mhm.
fascinating where there's such encouragement from it, but also there's a highly
Oh, it's a very
amount,
thin line.
right? Like so
Very.
to me it's that if there's some area of disruption I'd like to add to that, it's how do we be more aware or how do we work on that this is making it difficult or this is part of a larger issue of the mom and wine culture that is, we see it advertised on things, you see it on like kitchen towels and
Oh yeah.
like so
Yeah.
it's such a big thing at the same time then as we've talked about, if you have a problem with alcohol, then here comes talk about being on like the excluded list or talk about being like written off.
Yeah, it's a very weird, shall I say? I mean, there's better words for it, but kind of gray area. And I think one of the things that really ticks me off is that it's done in kind of a humorous way over something that's really um, not funny for for the majority of people. I don't know who anymore does not know somebody who has struggled with some form of addiction. And, seeing the kind of things, I was probably 6 months sober and I went into a little shop and they had this t-shirt that said wine addict, like super big across it. And I couldn't breathe. I just was like, oh my God, someone's going to read that. I mean, wear that, buy that, think it's funny. And um, it's everywhere. And so I think that it doesn't seem as harmful. It's not like an opiate crisis. It's not, those kind of things. It's not teenage vaping where, okay, that's bad. Smoking's bad. We've established that. This is more, it's so prevalent. There's so many things, even, craft night involves wine, game night, bring a bottle. And it's not just for women, it's, all these types of things. Fundraisers are always, everything is like alcohol, beer and wine are involved. And I know I can't, I mean, that's not going to change in my lifetime, but I do think that when we talk about compassion, we should kind of think about there's probably somebody in the room, at least one, who is really, really struggling. And whether they're ready to admit that or deal with it is something completely different. But just to show some, I want to say common courtesy, it's sort of,
Do you think we're
it's
seeing, do
difficult.
you think we're seeing any even slight movements that we have seen with some like there's sometimes more sober options, there's more of drink like we're not where we might want to be, but we are seeing a little bit of movement in some areas related to drinking. I'm just curious, are we seeing or have you seen or know of anything that's like moving with the direction of moms? And do we see more support for like moms in recovery or more groups out there for that? Are we hearing anything that's sort of saying it's definitely not where we want it to be, but it's it's in a different spot than we were maybe before?
I think that it's, I'm 51 and I'm kind of on this far end of the mothering spectrum. I don't have the young kids. I think that maybe younger moms are choosing a sober lifestyle because it's a choice for, whether it's health, fitness, overall well-being, that kind of a thing. And that's great. And I think there is talk about it in a theory, but as far as my everyday life, um, I don't know if we've really gotten to a place where we can change our behavior and our attitudes when it comes to mothers, women, whoever that's has a drinking problem. You just don't want to be around it. It's like
Right.
we're contagious or something, and you don't want to associate with somebody because gosh, what a party killer here. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. Thanks
and
for
even
sharing.
I have an example. My daughter got married, and my oldest daughter, she requested no alcohol at the reception. Um, and, you know, that was one of the things that she really wanted. It's pretty clear why, and they still, the other family, it was really important that they had alcohol there. And I thought, gosh, how tone deaf, number one, but also, can we not have a good time without that being so important? And, it was just kind of disrespectful in a way, not to me, but to my daughter's request. She's got a lot of trauma around drinking and just didn't want that. And I just find it interesting that that was so important to some people, um, even under the circumstances and knowing our family story.
I think a lot of it also falls under the like, for some things, this is the way we've always done it. Like there's been so much like culture, traditions that you bring up not doing it, and there's so like apprehension to it. But then part of it's like, well, why is this needed, or why must this be here? And part of it's
Yeah.
like, it's been the way it's always been, or this is how we do it, versus like
Right.
a lot of times we look at changing that to yeah, maybe it was, but now we can have this event or do this thing without it. I see that it was amazing to see that happen in Wisconsin here when we had a recovery night at the Brewers baseball game, where there was
Wow.
a whole it got media attention. It was
Yeah.
like the largest gathering of sober people who went to a game, and re the recovery night we had t-shirts, and it was on the Jumbotron, welcome to recovery night. And I
That's
remember
so cool.
and I remember saying or hearing so often that like, well, you can't go to a game and not
Mm,
drink, and that's the way it's always is. And part of it was like, no, we can show that it doesn't have to be. Like it can
right.
be something different. But it takes a lot to make that movement. Like that's not a simple thing. A lot of people may do that quietly, silently to create a gathering that really gains momentum to show that and highlight it is a challenge. In the meantime, there's a lot of people doing that silently that don't always get credit or recognition for what it's doing. So I think it's a really important conversation to have.
Yeah, I do too. And it just goes back to, kind of just treating people who have a substance abuse problem or, a drinking problem, whatever it is, that we're sick. Um, we're still humans. We still have a regular life. Uh, it's it's a challenge.
There's a part of your book I really liked that I wanted to ask you about, because I think it does present, the challenges and difficulties that people have. And part of it was your quote on, for me to get mad at a programmer, or the person next to me was like criticizing free life jackets while I kept drowning.
Right?
And
Yeah,
I really resonate with that, because part of me, I'm like, yeah, I'll just keep throwing life jackets, and I'm not going to stop doing that. And
right.
I've been working as a counselor long enough to also not take it personal when someone doesn't take it. But I also want to kind of highlight that's not easy to also do for family members and others to they maybe they're trying to change someone, but sometimes they just want to offer help to try and do something. And yet there is sometimes rejection towards that, or there is like a I'm not ready for it. And it's tough. It's tough for everyone
Yeah,
involved. And
absolutely.
unfortunately, when that happens, it becomes then sometimes crisis moments, or it becomes moments where relationships get further strained or damaged.
Hmm.
And to me, I'm kind of like, well, let's always try to make sure like that doesn't happen. Like there's enough going on right now to not have things get worse. But that really stood out to me as far as what that's like for people who are still trying to throw those life jackets out, but also at a point where you might not be ready for it, or you're fighting it away while you are drowning.
Yeah, I think part of it is that, because I grew up, went to like it's basically like my religion, if a comparison with Alcoholics Anonymous. And by the end of, you know, my downfall, which took a very long time, these same kind of things that were being said to me were not effective. Um, and the problem wasn't what I was being told, the problem was me. It was just, and I think that's also this problem, this issue I've got with, um, the 5 simple steps to do this, here's what, it's like, it is very, it's complicated. I mean, but I don't ever talk negatively about Alcoholics Anonymous because that's how I got sober. Um, every time was, through that kind of a program. I kind of think like you can use the 12 steps and not do it according to, Kathy B's way. You can figure out your own kind of way to do the same exact thing. And that's not how it was approached in terms of me. The other thing is, with rehabs, like, okay, I sent my loved one to rehab and 6 months later they drank. So, rehabs don't work. And every rehab I went to, no matter how much I hated it, how miserable it was, they all saved my life. I mean, I was at death's door, and so many of us are when we get there. And I mean, I kind of like the thing about rehab is, I mean, the addict really isn't supposed to like it in the beginning. I mean, you're detoxing, you're dealing with other people, you're being told what to do. It's like, um, and it's not the greatest place on earth, but it does keep us alive and it does surround us with people with, where we can just be ourselves, um, as gnarly as it is. So that's kind of what I mean with all these, like, everybody's tossing these things to me. I think that comment was in regards to a meeting that I continued to go to. And, people kept telling me things that weren't true, like, you're not being honest. Actually, I am being honest, but it just doesn't match what you want me to say. Or I would, oh, well, you're just not ready. Or you're just, you need to admit that you're an alcoholic. Or, yeah, it's like, that's not working for me anymore. So I think that was, part of the thing about this whole like life jacket thing was you're right. They do want to help. Um, I what they were giving me wasn't, I was still drowning.
Yeah, someone asked me this question, and I also want to reflect it with you because of how your story connects with this and the impact. Someone was like, "Well, how do you deal with it? Where someone is, you know, still actively using it or stuff like that." And I have begun to realize that like we don't get to choose where we join people in their journey. right?
Yeah.
Like I don't like I could be your first counselor, I could be your 10th. Like I don't
Right.
choose to be like, well, when they're sober and they're doing really well, like that's the point where I get to join alongside them. Sometimes that's what it is, right? But
Hmm.
I always realize like we don't get to pick and choose that. Like I worked at times when I was in, you know, a group home or halfway house program, and
Hmm.
part of it was they were in jail and then they come out so they're sober then.
Yeah.
But also I've dealt with people who are like, I drank this morning. And
Yeah.
so to me, I tell people that we don't get to choose where we show up. It's just when they do show up, we meet them where they are in their journey. And that can be entirely different. The one thing I want to talk to you about though that is hard to say that when you are like the family member or a loved one of someone with, because usually you're on a lot more of that journey than I am as a professional counselor.
Yeah.
And as I was reading your book, I was caught in the wrong place of being like, is this going to be the next? When's it going to be the time where this? And I was like, it's not it's not for me to then be like, I just want to join alongside wherever you are in your journey.
Hmm.
That's really hard to say for family members and loved ones.
Yeah. And bear in mind, I have alcoholics in my family. I grew up with two alcoholic parents. So the frustration is real because from the outside, it looks so simple. Don't drink. My husband and my mother had long-term recovery and are watching me struggle and would say, you know, all you have to do, Emily, is just not drink today. And I think that really, um, coming from someone who had suffered the same thing that I have, it was really, well, it pissed me off actually. But there is this kind of oversimplification of what an addiction actually is, and that it's not me voluntarily saying, oh, I can drink today. I mean, we're not in control. And your loved one, your family member, yeah, they're in there, but they're completely shrouded in this whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it a disorder, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I don't care, but they can't get through that to to speak for themselves. I mean, you're dealing with the addiction, the things that are frustrating you. It's
So
like if somebody had something else, I mean, would we be completely frustrated with the person for not trying harder, or would we be like, oh yeah, they're
what
really.
what would be your what would you say to family members who are, you know, trying to throw out the life jackets and the person's struggling to take them, or it's not going to be what works for them?
Mhm.
Like, what would you say to family members who are in that experience or going through that?
Well, I think the first thing is that, I mean, that is also like, I don't have a quick fast answer for that, but I think the best thing that, I mean, I'm thinking of someone very specific right now that's in my
Sure.
family. Um, and I just try to make a very safe space for that person so that they know if they ever bring it up, if they ever want to talk about it, that I'm not going to judge them, that I have an understanding, that they can trust me, and that I care. I care about them because they're who they are. Um, it's very hard to open up, even, somebody saying, how can I help you? I'm not going to tell you how you can help me if I know that when I say my issue, you're going to thrash me and um, get all, you know, controlling, kind of like it's not comfortable. It's not the safe kind of place. That's why, when I was struggling with this relapse, you know what I wanted more than anything? I wanted a friend. I didn't want somebody who was gonna, they're there or, let's make a list. Let's, I just wanted a friend that I could just talk to, whether it was about what I was struggling with or not. If there's no relationship before, if there's nothing there, if there's no foundation, why would anybody open up about something so incredibly shameful and personal? It's just it kind of a lot needs to happen before somebody's going to open up,
And I
you
really
know?
like that question. Like I really like the
Yeah.
idea of asking somebody. 'Cause I think sometimes when we ask people what they want or what they need, we're sometimes I think we've created this that sometimes we're not really asking. We're hoping the person says what we want them to say or need them to say. Like I
Mhm.
always think like when we out of all the people I've ever asked, what are your goals for coming into counseling or treatment? That every single person says stop using entirely. And I'm like, is that what does everybody want that? Like, does everybody want to be completely abstinent? But if you don't say that, then a place might think you're okay, you're not serious, or we're not going to take you if you are going to keep using. So I think
Well, can I
about,
can I add something onto that?
yeah, for sure.
If someone is struggling with, you know, I mean, they're not all there, right? Okay, we're in we're in the belly of the beast is what I like to say. We don't know what we want. We don't know how somebody can help. I mean, shit, I'm just trying to survive on a daily basis. So I don't really have those kind of answers. I still struggle with that now when somebody's like, "Well, how can I help you?" I'm like, that's that's just as much effort for me to try to explain what I need, what I'm struggling with, how you can help me. So maybe, it's if you know somebody, I mean, what would, this is about like changing perspective. And, what would somebody like, I mean, and just do it. Just do something um, from the heart for somebody. I'm not saying like, check them into a rehab and, not have a conversation first, but I'm saying, whether it's a parent, a child, a sibling, you know, a little act of kindness goes a very long way.
And I think sometimes the question of what do you need or what do you want is almost like in a sense of like what do you need that's gonna fix all this? Or what do you need that's gonna
Yeah.
take care of everything? But when you mentioned a friend, what I hear and think about is sometimes a friend doesn't have all the answers to fix what's going on. But sometimes a friend is like, "Hey, what do you need right now just to like get through today? Or what do you need in this moment that I
Hmm.
could like it's not a what do you need so that everything gets fixed, taken care of, goes away. But there's this like I think a different level of need that you mentioned that like right in this moment of just trying to figure something out or trying to get through something that this ask or this answer isn't going to be what all of a sudden gets me sober and helps me stay abstinent for the rest of my life right now.
Yeah.
But just how can we connect with people more in when we don't know those things or someone's struggling with it that we're able to just ask someone like hey, like for today like what about today what about like in the next hour or two is what would be something that would provide some kind of support for you or something that would
Yeah.
bring meaning to you right now or help, not saying this is what's going to change or fix everything.
No, because nobody is that amazing.
Yeah.
You know. But the other thing is, I think it's important for people who are asking that question to check their motives, because sometimes people ask what they can do because it relieves them. Like, well, I asked if she needed help and she said no, so, and it's like maybe it's our embarrassment, maybe it's we have guilt. Like, what is the motive behind me asking and continually asking? Is it because, like, how are my feelings connected to that? I think that's something to really consider. And also, somebody who is struggling, they need a little hope. That's really it. They're going to be the ones that make that turnaround with their addiction. Um, it's not somebody else. Nobody's going to do it for us. It has to be us. And I think one of something that really, really happened to me is I was absolutely 100% the alcoholic. And I don't have a stigma against that word. Like, it's true though. Like, that was all, like, that was consuming my life. And when somebody just treats you like a person, it's like this little light goes on, way back here that's like, ah, wow. And if somebody were to ask me, like, what do you want, Emily? I would say, I want a normal life. I just want a normal life. And part of that is remembering what's worth living for. And, you know, it's a hope that we kind of can give ourselves of like, oh, somebody was happy, or somebody asked me what I thought about something, instead of always, they came to me and said something. It's just like these little things that reminds us, oh, I am a person. There is more. There is more. Um, I still feel that, like when somebody says something and um, they want my opinion on, or they just want to like get something out, or they acknowledge something that I've done for them. It makes me feel um, like there is goodness in me. And when we're in the addiction, we don't feel that.
Yeah. Pretty profound. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's pretty insightful. The last thing I want to talk to you about before we kind of wrap up and get to a kind of like a final takeaway was this quote right before the end. It's actually on the page right before the finally chapter was sometimes we change and realize for the first time we are finally ourselves simply because we fit in our skin. And I thought
Mm.
that was really insightful because there's so much talk about change as persons. You gotta change everything you do. You gotta change all this stuff that gets talked about. And part of it is almost like this look at or people look at things outside, like this needs to change that. But you really bring it back that sometimes the change happens when we realize we're finally ourselves simply because we fit in our own skin.
Mm.
And what a journey that is from where that all started.
Yeah.
So I was curious, you know, your thoughts on that because I think there is a little bit of a journey of, self-discovery that we think is going out and figuring this out or doing this. And sometimes we forget that part of that is uh, right where we are, no matter where we go.
Mhm.
It's where we are in here. But that's also a very scary place to be sometimes.
Very scary. I mean, I got to the point, before that part in the book, I really did think that if I look at that thing or those things that I'm just desperately trying to avoid, that I refuse to even acknowledge, or, I just want to go to my grave with, then my feelings are going to kill me. I mean, fear is feels life threatening when it's, this is me, like, what's going to happen? Like, I'm not going to be lovable. What is this? And I just went full force into that fear. Um, because I I mean, I'm stuck with myself. Now, sober or not, and I was well sober at the time. What am I, is this really what I want to do? And the thing about like fitting in my skin means I know all the dark places. Like, I spent time there long enough that I know exactly what's in there. And I didn't have to do it in a performance way. It is very, um, you have to do it yourself. I mean, even a therapist can't do it. It's like we gotta get in there and look at it. Um, and lo and behold, we survive and we kind of understand a lot more. There's so many people in my life who who choke on acknowledging that they really, really screwed up. They made horrible, horrible decisions. Um, they, you know, I mean, I've said this before, but I definitely have a lot of trauma in my life. But there was a point where suddenly now I am the trauma of my children. They carry that as their story. And I couldn't live with it, but I also couldn't die. And you have to make this decision, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to muster it all up and I'm just going to go in there. And I can say that now. I can say I was not a good mother. I was a bad, I did a lot of bad things, and apologize for it. But also, like that woman who I used to be, suddenly I have compassion for her, that now I can extend to other people who are suffering. And um, I don't have to hide anything. I think that's the other thing about fitting in your skin, is that I don't have to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. Um, I'm kind of I'm an oddball. Okay. I mean, I'm in Texas, and I'm doing some really, I just don't fit the mold, I guess. And that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That was
Yeah.
a lot of deep stuff, and I think that's it's hard. I think part of people do look at there's for that kind of change and things to happen, you gotta go in there. I think we just don't fully recognize that it's not always easy being just with yourself or just looking at things inside of you that has been dealt with for quite a long time. So to
Well, I
read
mean,
that,
and also, that took me years. I
right.
mean, and you know, there's no formula, there's no right way to do it, but any change is uncomfortable. Even good stuff makes me a little wiggy. And there was so many years and so much stuff that got me into that point. So this isn't like, your first year sober, you're going to have this epiphany enlightenment kind of thing. I mean, I hope you do, but that was definitely not my story at all. So I want to
That
make that clear.
that's why I think like part of that becomes that journey, right? Where
Yeah.
people go out and think it's going to be this or hope it's going to be that, and there's a whole mix of things. But then eventually there's this part of coming back to where that, you know, there's got to be a place of I can do as much journeying and self-discovery and all that, but eventually like that's got to be with me no matter where I go, no matter who I'm with. That's not going to be I'm going to discover this and then that's going to take care of that, but part of it
Yeah.
is being able to go in into that, you know, deepness into who I am and being comfortable with that versus thinking I've got to change into something that's going to make it then better because we see that happen where that doesn't work either. Whereas
No, because
try
you just want to be better than that. I mean,
yeah.
but yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It is definitely a journey. And, most of the things that I learned were from absolutely causing major fires in my life and falling on my face. And, you know, the reason that I wrote this book really was to try to um, get it out, and it's only a memoir. It's not, there's no advice. I have no advice to give anybody because you know what? Uh, I mean, I don't want to do that. Uh, I think there's too much sometimes out there of oversimplified suggestions.
Yeah, I think that's why I really enjoyed overall many things. But I think one of the things I did enjoy about reading yours was there was no, after every chapter or at the end, there wasn't all right, here's now the plan to do this or how, like the things that I highlighted that we talked about
Yeah.
in this conversation were just things that had me think about stuff and things that stood out that were, let's sit with this and think more about it. It was more insightful, more than I think if you would have put those things down and been like, well, step one, do this, step two, do that. Like, I think that's what kind of really stood out to me was that,
Like, see, if I can do it, you can too.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
sharing your story the
Yeah.
way you did.
Yeah.
I was able to find insights and things that stood out that to me were really important that may not have come across the same as if you just highlighted them as this is the action plan that I did that now you do. So I think
Yeah.
that was very wise to do that in sharing your story that I'm not trying to give all the answers. I'm not trying to say work my plan, but by sharing my story, these are things that people can learn from or understand better, become more aware of and all that. So I really did appreciate that part of it.
Well, thank you so much. And I definitely think that people who read it, that's a sign of a memoir that even I want to read is one where like it makes me think about my own experiences in my own life. And gosh, where did that come from? And it's kind of thought provoking as far as the reader's life, not just mine.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, we could talk about this for so long.
I know.
It's been a great
Thanks.
conversation, but overall, what is it that you would want to give listeners as any, final messages or any takeaways, what you're working on or doing next, and just sort of what would you like them to leave with as we conclude our discussion here?
Well, based on our conversation, I want to say that, nobody has the perfect answer. And even I don't have the perfect answer. We're all amateurs here. We're trying to figure it out, and that's okay. It doesn't mean failure. It doesn't mean the end. It doesn't mean it's over. That you just keep going. And um, sooner or later, the time will come where it's you and you find a way that you can change and that you can better your life. And it's, whether you're the addict or not, it's all very tiny and it doesn't go like this. I mean, it goes, it's very non-linear. And there's no right or wrong. Like it's okay. Just
Thank
keep
you.
going, keep going.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate the conversation and discussion we had. Like I said, I read your book all the way through, which is usually not like the plan because sometimes I just don't have that
And yeah, and
time in my life.
it's a book. It's a heavy book. Yeah.
It is. So to be able to really read it in that capacity, I thought sort of just added to the, kind of joining alongside your book and everything that you shared. So Wife Mother Drunk it's really great. I've already recommended it to a couple of people because I know some people who work either with alcohol or with mothers, and that this is something that I think is definitely what they need to read or hear more
Yeah.
about, whether it's the professionals helping or the person struggling with it. So I just want to thank you for coming on the show and talking and sharing with us, and the discussion was amazing.
That's great. I had a great time. Thank you.
You've been listening to Talking Addiction and Recovery with Andrew J. Schreier. We're so glad you've joined us and invite you to connect further with the show and these topics at www.andrewjschreier.com. That's Andrew J. SCHREIER.com. You can also email us directly at talkingaddictionandrecovery@gmail.com and connect on social media, Instagram at Talking Addiction and Recovery, Facebook Talking Addiction and Recovery Podcast, and Twitter at TalkAR_podcast. To stay connected and never miss an episode, be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, friends, let's keep talking addiction and recovery.